Childcare isn't just a family concern, it's a business issue. It's a workforce barrier, but also a key contributor to economic growth. In Delaware and across the country, access to affordable, reliable, and quality childcare is felt by employees and employers alike. I sat down with Madeleine Bayard of Rodel and Carrie Leishman with the Delaware Restaurant Association to dig into the data behind this issue and talk about why childcare is really everyone's business. We dive into the industries and areas hit hardest, the unique struggles providers face, policy opportunities, and why collaboration between public and private sectors could be the key to real progress. Let's jump in. Welcome back to another episode of the Delaware State Chamber's podcast, The Delaware Deep Dive. I'm your host, Kelly Basil, and today we're focusing on the topic of childcare. We at the State Chamber have been highlighting this topic as a workforce issue for several years now, and during the pandemic, we hosted a webinar on access to childcare that led to a partnership with the Federal Reserve Bank of Philadelphia, Rodel, and the Delaware Office of Early Learning. Together, we held listening sessions throughout the state, published some research data and articles, and really elevated the conversation here in Delaware as a business issue. The work didn't stop there, and we're grateful to organizations throughout the state and the state of Delaware for continuing to address this topic. So I'm really glad to have two people with me here today. Madeleine Bayard, Senior Vice President at Rodel, and Carrie Leishman, President and CEO of the Delaware Restaurant Association. And together, we're going to dive deeper into how childcare is intimately tied to Delaware's workforce challenges and opportunities. Welcome to you both.
Thanks so much, Kelly.
Having us.
Very excited to talk about this topic. Before we jump in, I do want to give our listeners the opportunity to just get to know the both of you. So, Madeleine, you want to go first and just share who you are and what you do?
Sure. I'm Madeleine Bayard from Rodel. As Kelly mentioned, we do policy and advocacy and pulled together partners to work on issues like access to early care and education and other issues in K-12.
Hi, everybody. I'm Carrie Leishman. I'm the president and CEO of the Delaware Restaurant Association and our philanthropic arm, the Delaware Restaurant Foundation. So proud for the last 25 years to advocate and listen to who I think are the best entrepreneurs in the state and its restaurants.
And there are some amazing restaurants in Delaware. I come from the state of Ohio, and I always said when I first moved here that I grew up basically on chain restaurants, and then I came to Delaware and I was like, wow.
I know we are so lucky to have so many entrepreneurs that call themselves restaurateurs, and it's a hard business, so we're happy to have them and surviving and trying to thrive here in Delaware.
Yeah, and you do a lot of great work, both of you, in supporting Delaware employees and their families. So with that, let's just kind of set the tone for everyone. I'm going to share some data, and I know the two of you have a wealth of data to kind of build off of this, but from the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, who's done a lot around this topic, childcare issues cost employers approximately $2 billion annually in turnover and absenteeism. It's also estimated that 28 to 40% of parents turn down promotions, quit, or reduce work due to childcare, which leads to states losing an average annual total of $528 million in tax revenue. Now, to bring sort of a local flavor to this, in Delaware, families here pay an average of $20,000 or 38% of their annual income on childcare per child per year. And there is a maximum license capacity of just over 35,000 across the state, but a total of 54,000 children under the age of 5. So all those stats, I think, kind of just bring to light the complexity of this issue. It's a problem from both the supply and the demand perspectives. So there's a lot that needs to be looked at and addressed in order for childcare to really work for families. So with that, I guess I'd love to hear from the both of you, reactions on that data. Do you have additional information you can share with our listeners and just really help kind of tell this story?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks. I mean, you mentioned how expensive it is. You know, any business that's mostly people is expensive. And the smaller the child, the more people you need. And, you know, we want to invest in quality. This is about the workforce of today, supporting the parents. It's about the workforce of tomorrow and making sure kids get to school ready. And so investing in quality early really matters, that's expensive to do. And there are shortages. You mentioned about one slot for every 2 children. That gets as bad as one slot for every 6 children in some parts of the state. For every educator that we can't hire, the classroom that's closed, that's between 4 and 15 kids that aren't being served, that don't have a place to go. We talk to childcare programs that have waiting lists that are years long. You're about to have a baby, but we don't have a spot for your baby until they're 2 or 3. So this is real. It's impacting people every day. Really important topic. Thank you.
Yeah, and it impacts industries, and why restaurants, right? So, especially here in Delaware, let me give you some landscape. First, in our industry, the average age of a restaurant worker here is 16 to 35 years old, right? So many of childbearing age. 60% of restaurant employees are women, and a quarter of those have children. So imagine in Delaware, it's 53,000 employees work in Delaware's restaurants, and that's a big number. So whenever we have challenges with societal issues or challenges with our communities, they disproportionately impact our industry. And it's important to know that we lose so many women in the industry once they have a child. It's sort of that, the negative effect of having kids. We lose 25% of them when they have their first child, up to 30% when they have their second child. And this is a hard industry, right?
Yeah.
It's not easy. Couple that with the fact that Madeleine talked about not a lot of daycare openings. How about those industries that have non-traditional hours, right? They work late, they work weekends. So that really limits the opportunity to get quality daycare for restaurant workers.
Yeah, too. And I know you came to do this episode with us today from Sussex County, so thank you for making the drive. But even we talk about like childcare deserts too. So there are places in the state, and Madeline, I think you gave the stat like 1 in 6, but where there's just no options, and they might have to drive the complete opposite direction of work just to drop their child off to be looked after, and then an hour the other direction to go to work, and how do people manage that? It's very tough, and I think we all know it's important, and then you become a parent and you really feel it, and then employers, they have to deal with it, so it impacts everyone at every level.
Yeah, you mentioned how are people dealing it. We survey families every year, and more than half of families tell us that they're doing something that limits their own economic mobility and the economy of the state because of childcare. They're either not taking the job, not taking the promotion, like you mentioned. They're dropping out of the workforce, like Carrie mentioned. They're not going back to school, not starting a family, not buying a home. There are many ways that our Delaware economy is being held back because families would be doing things if they had access to affordable childcare.
Yeah, and you mentioned Kelly, Sussex County. Restaurants are the #1 employer in Sussex County, where we do have childcare deserts. The other thing is, restaurants need employees. I mean, it's the #1 issue post-pandemic that we're always searching and in search for a workforce. We have openings. It's one of the fastest growing industries in our state, and childcare is a barrier. Childcare is a barrier to those businesses' success and the people that work for them.
You mentioned industries, and I'd love to, maybe Madeline, do you know, there are some industries with non-traditional hours or different demands. What other industries are really impacted by this?
I think during our project with the Fed that you mentioned, we heard from some of those, non-traditional hours, even the poultry manufacturers who, have round-the-clock shifts. Carrie mentioned hospitality industry we heard from. That's an issue. We've heard cleaning services in Sussex County trying to turn over houses. Can't find people. So it's a lot of those non-traditional hours, as well as education. So you think about women childbearing age, those are a lot of teachers. We have a teacher shortage in K-12. We have a major teacher shortage in early care and education. Workforce is the #1 thing there as well. We've got child care centers with multiple classrooms closed because they can't find someone to work. A lot of those people themselves are childbearing age and either, make too much to afford child care or don't qualify for public assistance. So we hear a lot about it in education.
And it really does impact upward mobility as well. I have a story from a restaurateur in Lewis, Delaware, that has an amazing woman that works in his kitchen, and they want to give that individual raises and opportunity for growth within that kitchen and within that business. But because they lose subsidies, and it's the whole benefits cliff conversation. Right. that woman cannot take on more hours and more responsibility. And it's really doing a disservice to someone's individual economic mobility within that organization, or to move on to others, because they cannot. And it's not because people are lazy. It's not because they don't want to work. It's because this issue, it's a business issue.
Right.
And it's so important to them. It's a family issue. It's a business issue. And it's going to hurt people in the long run, and especially women who already lose upward mobility when they kind of get off that first ladder, that second ladder, because they're having children. And it shouldn't be that way.
Yeah. I'm curious. So how can we tackle this? And Madeleine, I'm going to look to you first because you're the policy expert here. But what are the proven strategies to addressing this challenge?
Yeah, thanks. Well, Carrie mentioned the benefits cliff. So just to break that down, right now in Delaware, families can qualify for purchase of care or state-funded child care if they make up to 200% of the federal poverty limit. For a family of 4, so 2 kids, that's about $60,000.
Okay.
The livable wage really for a family of 4 is 6 figures. So we have a lot of people between that $60,000 and $100,000. And if you make $62,000, you don't qualify, and then you're not making enough to afford all these expenses. So that's a big one. That's one where this year we did extend the benefits cliff so that people who qualify can stay for a longer period of time. They can keep the benefit longer. But it's a place where we could do more to reduce parent co-pays and sort of mitigate and ease the sharpness of that benefits cliff. So that is one.
It is a complicated subject, right? Because the benefits, the poverty wages, and the levels are all based on federal minimum wage, which is $7.25 an hour. Mm-hmm. It's harder here because minimum wage is $15, right? So now you're looking at increasing percentages for subsidies in Delaware when it is. I think there's solutions federally on that and on state levels as well, and you have to tackle it on both ends.
Great point. And some other states that we've looked at do disregard other types of income. So this is getting technical, but what does the state consider your income to be? And other states disregard forms of income like child support that might not be as predictable, or Social Security or workers' compensation. There are other things the state can do to maybe ease that cliff and make the sharpness of what's considered income maybe a little bit less steep for families. And the other thing that we've talked about, supply a lot. There's not enough supply. Part of that is classrooms and not enough educators to fill the classrooms we have. Part of it is just physical, actual locations. I've talked to childcare centers in Sussex. They say they could fill hundreds of slots if they had buildings tomorrow. One of them is the only one that serves infants in multiple zip codes in Western Sussex. I mean, we need a way to build supply, and there has not been an intentional one. So for about 6 or 8 years, we have not had a fund at the state to build capacity, build infrastructure, help people start up, help them retrofit buildings, build those incentives like we do for other industries, to build our supply. We know it's a foundation for the rest of the economy, so how can we invest in opening more centers? And then what many states are doing, and where Delaware has fallen behind, is covering more families. So right now, between all of our programs, so the federal ones like Head Start and IDEA, the state ones like pre-K and purchase of care, we're only serving about 1 in 5 kids. Okay. So everybody else is on their own. Many states have gone to universal, this is a constitutional right, or they're getting there. So some of them are starting to cover everybody, birth to 5. Some are moving that income level up. So I mentioned we're at 200%. States are going to 400, like Virginia. Vermont's going to 575. DC is for everybody. New Mexico is for everybody. So we need to slowly move that up, which our neighbors have done. Maryland, New Jersey, they've moved that 200 up, and we need to slowly do that over time so we're serving more families.
Yeah, and I think we have to get it right because, like Madeleine said, it's the economy. Right now, our labor participation rate in Delaware has held steady, maybe even lowered at about 59%. Right, Kelly, you know this. And it was a little bit high after the pandemic when we were rushed to grow and come back to work. But, I'm a fundamental believer in people want to work. They want to feel valued. They want that opportunity. But people are making real business decisions for their family. And these are part of it. It's childcare is a big part of it. And it's not just women. It's women and men. It's families are trying to make those decisions.
Yeah, definitely. I feel like we just covered so many points, and I'm trying to figure out which direction I want to go next. Let's go. You mentioned about the supply side. So let's go that way first. I think a lot of people forget that childcare facilities are also a business. And most often they're a small business. And this is an industry that's heavily regulated. There are costs involved, and as it should be, they're taking care of people's children. So we need to make sure that it's done safely and correctly. But how can we support childcare centers as a business?
Yeah, absolutely. Great point. Well, I think there are certain things, and you and Carrie can speak more to things every business deals with, like zoning and different wait times from state government. Finding liability insurance is becoming harder. There's a big opportunity we have coming up because the state's going to finally move to an online system for licensing. So protecting all those health and safety regulations, we want to maintain those, but we could streamline that process and make that a lot easier and maybe more get it through phases for centers and help them move through it more quickly. So I think there's an opportunity there to streamline government and probably address some things that all businesses face in terms of opening.
It's actually a really good subject, and I was at a meeting today. It's actually a task force that the legislature unanimously, with bipartisan votes, passed. It's actually called the Small Restaurant Regulatory Task Force. But what's really interesting, childcare is so important. Childcare actually has a seat on this task force to talk exactly what you both are talking about, and that's how do you reduce regulatory burdens for daycare, restaurants. We're tying it to small business. And other states are looking at this. In fact, Texas, as an example, has formed a coalition of businesses to really look at regulatory relief in the childcare system. And by the way, some of it is low lift. It doesn't have to be about big dollars. Right. And so I think there's creative solutions. We don't have to reinvent the wheel in many cases because there's states that are doing this work. Maybe it wouldn't fit in Delaware necessarily. We can Delawarize it. I'm not even sure if that's a word.
Delawarize, I love that
I don't even know if that's a word. I just made it up.
It is one now.
It is one now. But I think there's ways we can learn lessons that what's working and not working in other states from that perspective and bring it here to Delaware.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great point because I think this all comes back to, we talked about like economic impact of this, but and Madeleine, you mentioned that other states are addressing childcare. So this comes down to Delaware's competitiveness and employers, whether they're expanding here or choosing to locate here, they're looking at things like this: access to quality and affordable childcare. How's your education system? What's the quality of life like? Those are all really important factors when employers are looking to make big decisions. So I don't even remember which one of you said it, probably both of you, but we do have to get this right because it really does have a macro impact.
From a selfish industry perspective for a second, let's talk about the opposite. Restaurants want to get it right, not just for its workforce, but we want companies to relocate here, people to come here, people to dine out. They want to go into our restaurants. So yes, it's for our workforce, of course, but selfishly, restaurants bring luster to the state. They need people to come dine there, businesses to do well, people to thrive in their workforce so they can afford to dine out in our great restaurants too.
There are some other things that states have done, Carrie, as you mentioned, that just make things easier to operate. So other places have done back office service coordination. So most people that go into childcare don't have a business background. Some do, but many, are about kids, youth development. So other places have done things like offer administrative, payroll, employee benefits all behind the scenes as something that gets contracted out and actually ends up saving money because somebody with expertise is doing it in a scale rather than everyone doing it on their own. Another thing states have invested in is a substitute pool so that all that backup care isn't such a problem. If one of the workers, one of the educators can't be there, then you can call into a substitute pool like K-12 would do. So there are things we can Delawareize and learn from other states and that don't cost a ton of money.
No, those are some really interesting ideas. I never thought about like the substitute pool before. That makes so much sense. Common sense solutions.
Well, and all businesses right now are looking to, be efficient in their operations, right? Child care and restaurants share similar values that we need to operate efficiently because profit margins are low, yet we're still human-centered, right? So how can you combine sort of these efficiencies with human-centered caring approach for the people that we serve? So
Carrie, I'm curious. So, what is the Delaware Restaurant Association doing in this space to help its members?
You know, we are very involved. We are partnering with Rodel to help with the survey that I think we have an opportunity to gather information. That's part of what we're going to do, service thought leaders, and also I think a voice for the issue, because in so many places, the small business voice really isn't sharing how the challenges of daycare for their workforce is impacting their business. So I think sometimes you hear a lot like, we need more, there's not enough money. But if we took another approach and talked about how it's impacting one of the largest sectors in the state, and mostly small businesses, I think that could be of benefit to the whole conversation. That's why we're here today. And really happy to work with Rodel. We're so involved in the K through 12 space in education. And this is sort of the before that part. But it's exciting too, but I think information and getting the word out is the most important work we're doing right now.
That's great.
And thanks, Carrie, for being a part of our Advocacy Day. Like you mentioned, I think bringing it home to economics and something everyone can relate to. Not only did we have Carrie on our panel, but we had a bartender mom on our panel who said, this is real for me. Here's how it impacts me and my child every day.
And, we have a really large women of hospitality arm at the Delaware Restaurant Association. Not only do I care about this industry, but I care about the women in our industry. And I know this doesn't 100% impact women, but it does disproportionately fall on our shoulders. And so when we can support women's growth in business, this has to be pulled along.
Yeah. So you both are talking about this. And Madeleine, I know you and I have had a lot of conversations about this, but it is, for some reason, difficult to find those stories and elevate the voices on this topic. I mean, I think we all know that every business of every size and every industry is impacted by this topic. But I feel like we sometimes struggle to find those stories that really help visualize it for people. So I'll just say a call of action to our listeners. If you're an employer and this is something that keeps you up at night, like, please reach out to the three of us, because it is something that needs to be addressed. And in order to properly address it, we need to be able to engage with people like you. So.
Thank you.
And I think, like, if you think about restaurants too, listen, we're the cornerstone of every community, right? So we're in every neighborhood, we're in every corner of the state, from the smallest coffee shop to a large chain operation. So I think we have a unique opportunity and a responsibility to share those stories, like you said, Kelly. And people know restaurants, they care about them. In fact, we almost lost them during the pandemic. People really at one point thought they were going to lose them. So we're the right industry to share the stories that people can, I think, relate to.
Yeah. Madeleine, do you have anything else to add?
In terms of stories?
Anything, honestly, on the topic. You're our resident expert today. So
I mean, thank you for the call out for stories. We do find them in every industry. We find the youth development worker, we find the coffee shop worker, we find the bartender. And I think part of this is the sort of societal mindset shift, that's happened over the last few decades. Is most parents are in the workforce now, and most of us are struggling. It's a dedicated amount of time where we're intensely, committed to lots of things. I found a bit when I had young children that it was a little bit taboo. You figure it out. Like, we don't bring that to work. And so I hope as a society we see, no, this is truly impacting all of us, and we need to invest in it and not make it a taboo. It's part of humanity and who we are. And we want young families in the state. We don't want to make that a deal with it later problem or a move. One fascinating statistic from last year's parent survey is 1 in 5 Delaware families thought about leaving Delaware because of their childcare challenges. I mean, what is the future of this state if we can't keep, young families and young workers here?
Well, so. And that age group too, like, those are some of your most productive members of society. They're high level of consumer. Delaware's an aging state, right? So we do have a lot of older people here, and they, naturally spend less. They don't have home projects that they need to work on. They're not paying for childcare. They're not doing as much as, say, a younger family. And so those are some of your most productive members of society, and you can't lose them.
Exactly. And you mentioned, what can businesses do? Can we spend a couple minutes more on what else?
I was actually going to re-bring that up. So thank you for the segue.
One easy thing for businesses is the state offers a free service called Access Care. Children and Families First runs it. You can always tell your families to call. It's basically a hotline. I live in this place. I need a childcare that serves me at these hours. I either qualify for this service or I don't. And I think we can do a better job making sure people know that exists. Some employers offer flexible spending accounts, and I think those limits have been increased recently, which is great, so you can have pre-tax contributions to your child care.
I'm happy to say I take advantage of it, and it's amazing.
Yes. So offer that for your employees. Flexibility with hours, thinking about backup care, just-in-time care is something that businesses can contract for. So if your child care worker is sick, you can find another, option that day. But also just talk to them. Like, so why aren't you taking this promotion? We want you to work more. Carrie had some great speakers last year at the Women's Caucus say, hey, I got this catering business and I want to bring on more people. I want to pay them more, and I can't. Help understand what is the threshold and what is holding people back so that we can make this work for people.
Well, I'm also thinking out loud, hearing you speak, Madeleine, that there also could be some work we could do as organizations like Kelly, like the Chamber, or like the Delaware Restaurant Association, or other industry or healthcare associations, specific industry associations that are able to convene a large amount of businesses in a certain industry. Mm-hmm. And I think the information that you just cited, Madeleine, to talk about the options available, the information available, we need to do a better job at getting that information out to our members so that then they can communicate that to their employers and their employees. So I think that's one way that we can work together, not just from individual businesses, but from business organizations to get that word out.
Absolutely agree. Madeleine, we talked a little bit too. There's a survey too where we can kind of collect a lot of these voices and feedback. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, thank you so much both for the Chamber and the Restaurant Association's partnership to get voices of employers out into the conversation. Being a thought leader, just like you both have been, and seeing how does this impact our economy. So if you go to any of our social media, I'm sure it'll be on the Chamber's website where you can find the survey. This is a coalition of groups, First State Pre-K and others, working to talk about just what we're talking about here today. The impact on the economy, what does this mean for families, what does this mean for business, and how can we bring this up to our leaders so that we can work on some of these solutions together.
That's great. I'll wrap with one last question, but I'll still give you both the space to kind of whatever final words you feel you'd like to share. But being that this is very much a workforce issue, we talked about how businesses can kind of play a role in helping, but how do you both view the business community at large's role in solving this challenge? What are your thoughts on that?
I look at it in multiple different ways, but I often, and when we're in Dover and we're asked to solve problems, sometimes not in a fair way, the legislature will look at a societal issue and look to the business community to solve it, mm-hmm. or to pay for it, or to be disproportionately and financially involved. I do believe it's a coalition, and I do believe that there's so many different voices to share in this responsibility. I don't think it's any one sectors, whether it's childcare sector, government, business. I think we need to have big boy conversations and big girl conversations around the table at really ways we can work together, some that don't cost a lot, some that do, some that look at, like you said, regulation. I think it's going to take everybody at the table. I don't think any one industry owns it, mm-hmm. because I think it impacts everybody.
Yeah. Madeleine?
Absolutely. Being a part of the coalition. I mean, leaders, job creators in the state, having those voices at the table that, it's not really just a nice thing to have. It's an essential thing to have for school readiness and all the reasons that we know that it impacts society. It's also essential for workers and for keeping young families in Delaware. So being part of the conversation, thought leaders, coming up with creative solutions, and being at the table to make sure we're continuing to move this issue forward.
Great. Any final words from either of you?
I know. I think
something we didn't cover that needs to be said.
No, I think this is great. It's rare that in Delaware, or it's not rare. Delaware's great at this. Other states are not. That we can pull so many different diverse voices together to try to address issues. And thank you for bringing this up on your podcast, Kelly.
Yeah. Thank you.
Awesome. Okay, so we're going to switch over to our Combo Connection segment. I've asked both of my guests to be prepared with a shout out. It could be a person, it could be an organization that they just feel deserves an extra spotlight today. So Carrie, will you go first?
Yeah, so I love restaurants, guys. I think that's so cool. So I want to shout out Platinum Dining Group today, who they have a successful number of restaurants, Taverna and Red Fire, a number of restaurants throughout the state, mostly up here in Newcastle County. But they're so cool, and workforce is super important to them. So they're very involved through our foundation and involved with our apprenticeship programs or working with our high school students. So what I love about restaurants are we're GED to PhD and everything in between. So this is one group that gets it and works really creatively and hard to bring people into the restaurant and move them from entry-level jobs to living wage, sustainable, beautiful careers. So I want to shout them out today.
That's a good one.
We love restaurants for workforce development and education because it's often people's first job. So they're getting their first workforce experience. And just staying with the food theme, I want to shout out the Delaware oyster industry. It's a local industry, tastes delicious. It's filtering the bay. It's doing good for the health of our environment, and Delaware Cultured Seafood, Rehoboth Bay Oysters, check them out. Mark Casey, who represents Delaware in the East Coast Shellfish Growers Association, shout out to them.
Oh my God, this is farm to fork today. I love it.
Those were very good shout outs. I'm going to give a new member shout out. Dave's Hot Chicken is coming to the state of Delaware. Their first location is opening in a couple of weeks, actually, in Dover, but they're going to end up having one in each county. So if you haven't had Dave's Hot Chicken before, check them out.
Why does it always revolve around food? I love it.
Because food's so good.
I know. Thanks, guys.
Thank
you.
You.
If any of our listeners want to get in touch with either of you, Madeleine, how can they get a hold of you?
Oh, rodelde.org.
Love that.
And you can find us at Delaware Restaurant Association.org.
Great. And if you want to get in touch with me or any of my colleagues here at this chamber, you have ideas for future episode topics, you can find our contact information at dscc.com. We're also on social media, Facebook, X, LinkedIn, YouTube, and Instagram. And with that, thank you both so much for joining me.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks, Kelly.
Thanks for joining us for another episode of the Delaware Deep Dive, brought to you by the Delaware State Chamber of Commerce. Before we sign off, please take a moment to subscribe, rate, and review wherever you listen. I know podcast hosts say this all the time, but your support is invaluable, and it helps other listeners easily find us. I'm your host, Kelly Basil. We'll see you soon.